Hi, everyone. My name is Michele Clark, and I'm currently a Science and Technology Policy Fellow with AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. I relocated here to Washington, D.C. to work with the Department of Energy. Originally, I would consider myself an invasive plant ecologist, and my PhD work focused on the drivers of invasive plant species and plant distribution within community forests of subtropical Nepal. In particular, I focused in on how this related to the lives and livelihoods of rural people around community forests. Now, my work within the Department of Energy focuses on how we consider different benefits for communities, again, for local livelihoods as it relates to workforce development and training, and the ways that we can think through a just energy future for the United States and for the globe. I'm also a critical response process facilitator, which is called CRP. And it was generated in the dance community, the choreography community, as a way to think about how we give and receive feedback. And I found it really salient to the ways that we give and receive feedback within STEM and within higher education. And it's a mindful practice for all the parties involved in relationship to how how we communicate with each other. So I'm excited to share more about that soon. One of the academic accomplishments that I'm most proud of is being able to receive a Fulbright Research Award. During my PhD, I did most of my research within subtropical Nepal, and I was lucky enough to be able to get this research award and move to Nepal for a year to live in community and to focus on meeting the people that I was learning so much about and having a direct relationship with them. Fulbright is something that I've known about since I was young. I don't remember the first time, but I knew that it was this really interesting award where you got to live abroad and work with community. So I was excited to have that opportunity while I was doing my research. And at first I thought, oh, this might not be a possibility, but being able to work with my program in my department, I was able to pursue my research and keep my PhD ongoing while also being supported by Fulbright. I'm fortunate that I made a really strong bond with my Nepalese family that I lived with as a host family, and I still stay in contact with them almost every single day. So it feels great to know that not only did my research have an impact, but I had this opportunity to have an individual personal relationship there. After graduate school, I started making some career shifts, realizing that I would want to take on and learn a little bit more about project management and one day take on a director type position. I thought at first that might be in higher education or in academia, but as I was going through different programs and trying out different research experiences, I felt really drawn to building up programs, but also wanting to try things outside of academia and outside of the university that I had been working in. So I'm proud of myself now for trying out this new experience as a STPF fellow. I really struggled with receiving criticism, especially criticism related to my writing. And we're constantly told like how important it is to write and to write consistently and to write like a scientist, but yet we're not given a lot of instruction in how to do that. And we're often seen as comparing ourselves to each other. And so I found that really challenging from a peer-to-peer level, but also in relationship to my committee and my academic advisors that um, when I would get comments back on my dissertation chapters, instead of serving as a motivator for me to get back to work, I would be even nervous to open up some of the drafts that I was so proud of sending, and then only for a day later to be really, disheartened or disillusioned in seeing some of the feedback. And I wasn't really upset about disappointing others or my advisor or my committee, but rather I wanted to be able to take on those criticisms and incorporate them and actually improve. But I just didn't know how to do that. And there didn't seem to be a way forward at sometimes. And it ended up causing me to procrastinate a lot. And even though I really previously had enjoyed writing so much, it put me at a standstill. So at one point in time, it was like a 6-month standstill for me opening a document. It felt like I couldn't get back to work on that particular chapter, which felt very unlike me. And it made me feel like I was lazy. So much so that one time I went to the doctor to get my nutrients levels checked because I thought I had like some sort of disorder. Like I was like, why am I, when I wake up, I'm stressed, or like, why do I need to go to sleep at night with all this like stress on me about this one seemingly small thing? My nutrient levels were fine. So I started to build up this resentment towards myself and my writing, and I was really having trouble getting inspired to write and wondering like what's wrong with me and how can I not figure this out when clearly I felt like I was good at this before coming to graduate school. And so all of this started to turn into fear, and I wasn't really sure how to ask for help because at that point it becomes, this criticism of writing becomes a criticism of yourself. And I also felt like there wasn't many people I could talk to about this, given that I was like the first person in my family to go to school and really have these types of experiences. So it felt like even if I brought certain things up, no one was really there to help me in a tangible way. In an abstract way, sure, my friends and family loved and supported me, but in a really specific, tangible way, I felt like I couldn't move forward. So in general, I lost my taste for writing overall, and it became really hard for me to come back to those different parts of my dissertation. And it also put a strain on my professional relationships because if you're not doing your writing, it looks like you're not eager to get back to work or that you're not motivated to do the work. So from the outside, whether it was true or not, I know that there was that perception of me and my work at the time. Being a person who's always been drawn to school and coursework and classes, I immediately thought, I need to read 10 books on how to write and I need to enroll in a bunch of classes. So that's what I did. I enrolled in 3 writing classes all at the same time in the same semester, 2 of which were from the same professor who was she was retiring that year, but she was really, really helpful in helping me to reframe my relationship with writing. And also to encourage me because this was someone who'd never seen my writing before, and to get immediate positive kind of statements of meaning about my work that were putting it in a bright light when I had been in a dark place for a while was very encouraging. It also had a lot of peer-to-peer work within those classes, so I could work with other of my colleagues within the university that I hadn't met before, and it helped me to get unstuck from those moments just to know that other people went through the same challenges that I did. Um, I also supplemented these classes by reading books on writing and trying to implement a few of the different strategies. My favorite one that I still use to this day, and I apply this analogy in a lot of different ways, is to prepare the altar. And that just means prepare the space for which you're about to write. And so that's like decluttering your desk, getting rid of other distractions, putting your phone away if you're a person who's prone to phone usage. Mine's also like any sort of instant messenger, Teams chat, anything that'll pop up on my screen is like a quick distraction for me because it seems urgent and immediate. But if I shut those down, or I guess Slack, whatever everyone's using these days, I try to shut those down so I can stay focused. And then I started by also writing things that seemed like lower lifts. So instead of being like, I need to write all of chapter 4 of my dissertation, instead it was like, I need to write a little bit about the acknowledgments, or I need to write a little about the dedication today, or something else. I need to just write 1 paragraph of the introduction of this chapter. So piecemealing things out. And so that was just mindset setting in terms of the practice. On top of that, I really love creative writing, and that was what brought me into writing in the first place and made me passionate about it. So I was able to rewrite or write again and finish editing some children's books for my nieces and nephews, going back to what I was passionate about. On top of all of that, I also started going to therapy. And I should say, for context, this was also during the height of the pandemic. So I was isolated in my writing, but I was also just isolated as a person at the time. There's a lot of thoughts that go through your head when you're alone, and there's not other people to help, rectify or put you back on a path towards coping. So to kind of reduce some of the anxiety I had around just the world in general, but also my writing, I was able to go to therapy. From this experience, I learned a lot. I learned that through the writing class, how to identify my struggles with receiving feedback. And I learned that it's not just feedback through my writing, but in general, any sort of critique I really struggled with as it was related to my science. And I started to learn that that wasn't so much because the critique was about my science, but rather that it started to point towards me as a person and as an individual. And that made me think that many times feedback, the way that it's given, is targeted towards the individual and can be somewhat demeaning rather than being focused on the work and the creative process at hand and how that can be improved or changed. So this inspired me to become a facilitator of critical response process that I mentioned earlier, which is a way of giving and receiving feedback created by Liz Lerman, who's a brilliant mind, dancer, and choreographer, who's written multiple books about critical response process and in her relationship to giving and receiving feedback in the dance world. And I saw that resonate so much with STEM and the sciences. One of the things that critical response process has taught me is not to feel like things that are out of your control or that are not necessarily your fault in relationship to critique, and the ways that we can find paths forward together. So especially peer-to-peer mentoring or peer-to-peer relationship building or expanding your mentoring network, to find others who support your work and can give you different ways of thinking through and strategizing about your writing or whatever challenge you're going through. And on a positive note, I also learned that everyone is going through some version of these kinds of struggles. And so now I'm more open with my friends and family about how I feel in relationship to my current work or certain things that are going on in society or within my own interpersonal life. And I'm also able to have an open dialogue with them about my struggles, and I can hear positive reinforcement from them in the times when I really need to hear that. My advice for current graduate students is to think about, oftentimes we think about our end goal and how we're going to get there, and it seems like this straight shot to getting there. But rather, like, all the paths that we're taking is like a journey or a pathway towards getting to maybe something completely different than what you thought was going to be your end goal. And if we think of failures instead of thinking of them as failures, let's think of them as different steps along that path, because I think almost anyone that you ask about a failure is going to tell you what they learned from it and how they moved forward from it. So in that way, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If anything, it can be a really pivotal part of your life and making a critical change that might be really important to your successes later on. So I try not to think of them as failures. If I did, I'd probably encounter a failure almost every single day, but that's okay too. I also like to think not just of our academic selves, but really to think of yourself when you're in graduate school, that you're on this larger journey and that there's all these different parts of you and different passions that brought you into this research and into this space. And the more we can remind ourselves of why it is we're truly here, beyond getting our degree, beyond, finishing this particular paper or chapter, it helps us to remember, like, really what it is that we're encouraged to do and motivated to change in the world. And I also like to think of the different challenges that we might face as boulders in the pathway of life, and that sometimes we need to overcome these obstacles either by going over them, going around them, but breaking through them too. And breaking through those moments can be really take a long time, but it can also be the most worthwhile part of the path. Challenges will always happen and they're inevitable, but they give you the opportunity to learn even more about yourself. Thanks for watching Fail Safe Science. My name is Michele Clark, and I hope my story helps you as a graduate student, as a person, to overcome whatever obstacle might be in your way right now and to feel empowered moving forward.